Welcome to the Compendium Podcast hosted by Leadership Books. In just a moment, our host, Joseph Baker, will be joining us, along with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Joseph. He's a podcaster, event producer, writer, speaker, and audience builder. His passion is to help authors, speakers, and entrepreneurs build their audiences to monetize their leadership. Won't you please welcome our host, Joseph Baker.
Welcome, everyone, to a special edition of the Compendium Podcast. I am here today with author, speaker, coach Jaemin Frazer. We are here live at the NSA 2022 conference titled Influence in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm here recording this podcast with Jaemin Frazer. He is the author of Unhindered, the 7 Essential Practices for Overcoming Insecurity. Jaemin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So we've been here live at this conference, and you actually just got done with your first book signing. How did that feel?
It's lovely. It's always amazing thinking about how far I've come in terms of, the earliest idea to imagine a world where I'd actually written a book, and not only had I written a book, but I'd written a book that got released into the world, and not only that, it got released into the world in a way that someone else found useful.
That's
awesome. This is the third book that I've written of 5, and it's the book that gets most traction in the world, and to have more people connected to that book and a chance to sign it personally and engage with people about such a vulnerable subject and a subject that causes so much unnecessary suffering in the world.
Yes.
It's a lovely experience. It's a very joyful and rewarding experience.
That's awesome. There's nothing quite like meeting people in person, right? We do so much over Zoom.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's a necessity nowadays, but to be at an event like this and to meet people in person and to be able to talk to them about the message of your book, it's very powerful.
Absolutely. Very powerful, very enjoyable.
Now, you flew all the way from Australia. How was your flight, and what is it like to be in the U.S. for a little bit?
It was a long flight, and it was interesting. As I was walking down the runway, not the runway, the tunnel to get on the plane, I noticed, I looked down and my fly was undone. I went to do it up again, noticed my zipper had burst. So I thought, there you go, I'm heading to the US with my balls out. And so it kind of felt appropriate just to come here.
Yes.
There was a long flight, and the 2 females either side of me were probably wondering why, if the whole flight, my fly was undone.
What's going on? Well, it ties in well to your book, right? So you're obviously a very secure person, okay? And, the title of your book, The 7 Essential Practices for Overcoming Insecurity. Why did you choose insecurity to be the message of this book?
I think it chose me, really. Just as I've journeyed through my life from being a pastor at 23 and being invited into people's world to talk about change, and then continuing to develop my skill, getting introduced to the coaching world and realising those technologies belong to those conversations. But examining my own life as I tried to be more meaningful and effective in the world, I uncovered insecurity. And so that to me seemed to be the big block between whether I'd ever fully show up, whether I'd shrink back. So watching what happened as I solved that problem in my own life, and then just noticing how much suffering is in the world because people don't know it's a solvable problem.
Yes. It
just felt very unkind not to write about it.
Yes.
When I launched the Insecurity Project, my business coach at the time said, "You can't do that, Jaemin. Like, people are insecure about being insecure. It's too vulnerable. No one's going to put their hand up and say, 'Come help me.' It's too confronting, and it goes against business rules. I should be the confidence guy or the self-esteem expert or the security coach, not the insecurity guy." So, but it was a real defining moment for me as I thought about that message and felt, no, this is what I was born to do.
Yes.
And so I doubled down on that and went, well, I'm just going to talk about it from the start and be very clear, so that when people feel the pain or an insecurity and think they're ready to have a conversation, well, there is a clear bit of work in the world that would tell them this is solvable and there's a way out the other side.
You're positioning yourself as the go-to guy in that space.
And not in an attempt to boost my own status in the world, just to go, I would love people to feel certain that someone has thought about one problem their whole life
Yes.
intelligently, clearly, and come up with a solution. I
Yes.
love thinking about that in other books I've read. I love the problem solvers, the people who've devoted themselves to something important
Yes.
and stuck in
Yes.
their lane and
Yes.
done their work. So if I'm going to speak about insecurity, well, then I may as well do it with my whole heart.
Might as well do it, yes.
And be known as the insecurity guy.
Yes.
And leading speaker around the world. That would be for me to be wholehearted about that subject.
That's awesome. As you were doing your signing just a few minutes ago, again, we're here live at NSA 2022, so there was a whole line of people, and you actually posed a question to one woman. You said, do you ever think about the subject of insecurity? And she said, every day or
Yeah, of
all the
course.
time,
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. So what I love about this is you're addressing something that, quite frankly, we all deal with, right? We have imposter syndrome at times. We're insecure. And what is the downside of that? What is insecurity stopping people from doing, in your opinion?
Well, it can be like rocket fuel when you're young. I think if you have an objective look at the impact of insecurity on your performance, if you're out there as a young 20-year-old or into maybe early 30s, really trying to prove that you matter, that energy to prove and defend
Sure.
will actually increase performance. It increases irrational decision making, which is actually useful because people will tell you, no, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, but it's like, get out of my way and I'll show you.
Yes.
So it's like rocket fuel.
Sure.
However, it's also corrosive and destructive and has a lot of collateral damage.
Sure.
And it weakens us to the point of madness. So I think that's not being dramatic to say that if you don't eradicate insecurity from your life beyond midlife, it is a slow but definite descent into madness. You are weakened to the point of madness, and all your best energy is devoted to proving yourself and defending yourself, which is so inefficient.
And exhausting.
And exhausting, of course. How can you possibly do your best work in the world if your best resources are all around your own, existential angst around who are you, do you matter, are you good?
Yes. So you have 7 essential practices, okay? So we're not going to go through them today for the course of this episode, but what I want to ask is a different type of question. What is an essential practice that didn't make it into the book? What's something that you've thought about since you've done this and said, oh my goodness, I should have put it in the book, but it didn't make it?
There isn't. No, there's no other essential practice because one of the things that I'm non-negotiable about is smoking what I'm selling. So, I'm a life coach, which is a dirty term most of the time. You go to a networking meeting and you're a life coach, you shuffled off down the back with the Amway salesman. It's an unregulated industry. There's no barrier to entry. And so the only way to survive as a coach in the world is to embody your message. The only way. So you can't fake that, but it's a long thing to do. So I'm non-negotiable about, the only thing I speak about is the stuff that I have learnt and understood. So it's the embodiment and the overflow. So, oops.
You're good.
So I wasn't guessing. It wasn't a work in progress. It was the road-tested, evidence-backed, embodied message that then I wrote about.
That's great.
So I think it is a complete model that
great.
works, and it's the one that I use every day. I get invited into people's world to have conversations about insecurity, and that's the model.
Tell us about, without mentioning names, because we'll keep that private, but tell us a general story of somebody that you coached.
Great. This is a general story that happens every single time.
Sure.
So, without doubt, people assume that the way to deal with the past is to separate yourself from it. It is what it is. You can't change it. Sure, there was stuff back there that impacted how I think about me, but my best chance of being a healthy human being is to distance myself and just be forward focused, be positive, be kind from here. They don't want to go back. The human condition is, we want to be good, but we're afraid we're not. And for fear of that badness ever being exposed, we run or we hide. So people don't inherently want to go back and review. So I say to people all the time who say, Jaemin, you're a coach, we're forward focused, we're success, we're outcomes, we're about the future. We don't go back, do we? And I say, I never take people back into the past, except where it's necessary. and it's always necessary. Buckle up, we're going back. So
That's good.
but we're always going back, and we're going back to the little things, which is the generalization. People think, okay, there'll be dragons back there and we're looking for abuse or, severe bullying or,
Yes.
My parents' divorce or this stuff must have really been bad. That's almost never what causes insecurity. It's the little things. You think about being a kid,
Yeah.
and there are no little things. Everything is a big thing. You're 5. You ask your dad to make you a honey sandwich cut in triangles, and he gives it to you cut in squares. Like a 5-year-old can have an existential crisis. Why does everybody hate me? Why can't I get what I want?
Yeah.
The only thing in the world I wanted was this, and I can't have it. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So I promise you, it's little things, and it's little things that have gone, that you've made assumptions about yourself.
Yes.
Why did this happen? What does it mean about me? You've personalized it negatively and then doubled down on that, gathered more evidence, formed a narrative, and then that narrative has become the operating system for everything. So
Yes.
the generalization is, when we go back, what we're looking for, the origins of these limiting beliefs are always little things before you're 7.
Oh, wow.
And so
Wow.
people are always surprised at that. But it's glorious when you go back and find a wounded child who's still battling with a misunderstanding about something that, ostensibly is quite simple, but
Yes.
they've catastrophized and personalized
Yes.
and
Yes.
created a fiction about themselves based on an assumption
Yes.
about a small defining moment.
Yes.
So,
So for those of us watching and listening that would like to find out more about your work, where can we go? And specifically, where can we find your book? But then where can we find your overall brand and your services that you provide?
great. Well, obviously, you guys host my book here, and so that's a great way to get it if you're in the USA. You can find it, on my website. Google the Insecurity Project or Jaemin Frazer if you can work out how to spell my name. But yeah, I have a podcast, the Insecurity Project, and if you kind of inquire about overcoming insecurity, you'll find something I've written or spoken about on this subject.
Awesome. Well, Jaemin, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of the Compendium Podcast. For all of our viewers and listeners, please check us out at leadershipbooks.com, also jaeminfrazer.com, and theinsecurityproject.com. Yes. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium Podcast.